Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my webinar on holidays and celebrations after loss. I know that this is a really difficult time of year for people, and I'm really passionate about helping them to find a way to face the holidays and to be able to enjoy themselves a little bit and be with family and friends, and yet understand the grapple effect that they're going through, going from one to another, and it's just extreme emotions that can happen. Losing a loved one, for me, it's just heartbreaking, and losing a child is heart-shattering, and then the holidays and celebrations just become heart-wrenching for everyone. It's just an incredibly difficult time of year when everyone around you is happy, and they may be excited about family coming home or seeing friends, and Christmas is just around the corner. We're only days away from it. And typically it is a time that is rich in tradition. It's a time of joy. It's a time of sharing and gift giving. But for you who may have lost someone, it is a time that there's a huge missing piece in your life. And that's your loved one who's not here. Or there may be several loved ones who are not here. And you're wondering, how do I get through this? How do I even go through another day? So throughout the presentation, I will be sharing some information about my story and another individual. Some of you know me, some of you do not, and so I'll give you a little bit of a background. I've had many, many losses in my life, starting at a very young age, but the ones that were the most profound that put me onto the path of becoming a counselor and an author and speaker and grief educator, and what I like to call myself a hope generator to help people get through the journey of loss, began in 1989 when I lost my brother, Brian. He was 39 years old, and he suffered a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which was caused by an interaction of prescription drugs. Two different doctors prescribed them and hadn't consulted on a change in the medication. So it put him into hypertensive crisis and literally blew his brain apart. And there was no hope for him. They told us that right from onset. But he did survive for 2 weeks in a coma, and we had to make the decision as a family to take him off life support. He left behind a wife and 3 young children. My mom was still alive, and of course 6 siblings. Our father had been killed in a truck crash just 2 years before that on the Hope Princeton Highway, which was a very horrific crash that he was in a big 18-wheeler that went over the side of a mountain. So we were barely just getting through that. My dad was only 54 years old, so he was, by all standards, a young man still. And just coming through the tailspin of his death when Brian died. And that was a pretty difficult time for me. Him and I were extremely close, Brian and I. He's the eldest of 7. I was the middle child. Big brother to all of us, of course, but him and I had a real special connection. He even named me, and, I was devastated. But having said that I was devastated, I also went into a big denial because he did have a wife and 3 children and a mom, and I just wouldn't allow myself to go to that place of grief and sorrow because I didn't want to call attention to myself. I really felt that they deserved it more than I did. Following year, my brother died on March 10th, 1989, and in 1990, May 19th, my husband Jerry, who was 37 years old, was hit on a police motorcycle and sustained a severe brain injury, and there was no reason to believe that he wouldn't survive. He had massive injuries, physical injuries as well as cognitive because of the brain injury. But the physical injuries all healed, and I brought him home within 3 weeks, more because they couldn't cope with him at the hospital, not because he was ready to come home. But in those days, they had very little in the hospitals, in smaller centers for people with brain injury and how to look after them. So I took him home. But he died 5.5 months later after the accident of an unexpected heart attack that was catastrophic in nature. And had he survived, he would have sustained, he did actually sustain as much brain damage with the heart attack as he did the night of the motorcycle accident. So In many ways, the doctors felt that his death was a blessing, and certainly on one level I could understand that, but on a heart level, that was not how I felt at all. And we had 2 little girls who were only 10 and 12 at the time. Now, as well as the 2 of them, my good friend Ruth, she was 43, and she had 2 daughters, very close in age to mine, and her husband was my husband's boss in the RCMP. Ruth had been injured 3 years before Jerry in well, she was hit by a car in a crosswalk, and she sustained a significant brain injury as well. And when Jerry was injured, Ruth started to have some very significant symptoms that were very odd, and so upon investigation they discovered that she had developed an inoperable brain tumor where she had had surgery at the time of her crash. And it was inoperable, as I said, so she was not expected to live. And so the 5.5 months that Jerry lived, everybody was struggling with Ruth dying, and was he going to make it? And then she died 2 weeks before my husband. And you can imagine sort of the ripple effect through the police department, because this was their boss's wife and everybody was very close to them. And then 2 weeks later, my husband died. So major impact for the men and women who worked with him and served with him. You know, went on to, you know, for some of them had some very significant consequences in their life, and marriages ended, and people began drinking too much, and you know, all kinds of emotional battering went on because of these deaths. So I wasn't the only one that was hurting. My children were not the only one who was hurting, but certainly because my husband died in October and Ruth died in October, you know, Christmas was right around the corner, and it was Halloween and all kinds of things that we were, you know, had been so excited about in any other year, and this year was completely different. So I had to find a way to get through the holidays. I'm just going to advance the slides here, which doesn't want to do that. There we go. So, you know, the myth of year one is one that I talk about a lot to people, because everybody tells you, you know, just get through the first year, just get through the first Christmas, get through the first birthday, get through the first Father's Day, the first Mother's Day, the first Valentine's Day, the first Easter, just get through all those first without that person, and then it's going to get easier. And, you know, the truth is, every day without them is a first day without them. And that was a big lesson to me, to allow myself to feel that, because my children, as I said, were only 10 and 12 years old, so they had a lot of life ahead of them. They still have a lot of life ahead of them. They're in their 30s now. One is turning 35 tomorrow, and the other turns 37 in January. But you know, they have a lot of life in them. I do too. And every day that we go through something new is a day without their dad or my husband present. And that, you know, became really apparent, particularly in observing my children and realizing that they needed to get through graduation, their first date, getting married, having babies. All of those are first without their father. All of those are first with me without my husband. I have remarried. I'm very happy. They have a wonderful stepfather, and he's a wonderful grandfather to our grandchildren. And you know, but it doesn't replace their dad. Doesn't replace their dad. He's never tried to replace their dad. He's always made his own place in our life. But still, you know, people from the outside, people think, okay, well, you're remarried, and they've got a stepdad, and life, you know, been together 20 years now, and life is fine. But all of you know, too, that what people from the outside see isn't necessarily what's going on behind closed doors. So the myth of year one is pretty profound. And the reason why it is partly because, you know, grief just has no time frame. It doesn't have a calendar. It doesn't have a clock. It is unpredictable. It, you know, just goes on and on. It can be triggered in many ways by many things at different times in your life. And, you know, people who haven't experienced what you and I have experienced certainly have this notion that, well, you know, 6 months has gone on, so you should be fine. Things should be better. A year has passed, so, you know, you shouldn't be thinking about or dwelling on that anymore. Or your dad died when you were 10, you're now 35, that's 25 years. Like, you should be over that. And there's some very reasons why children go back, and I will be talking about that they go back and revisit their grief as they age and get new world experiences. So you can't just say to people, it's been this specific time frame, move on, because it does not work that way. And only those people who have actually lived through this journey will really understand that. No time frame, so no clocks, no calendars, pardon me, that are going to help with that. So what's the first year really like? Well, this is a very small list of potential responses that can happen. We are in shock initially, and that's really our body's way of, our own defense mechanism to keep us from harm or from just dropping dead ourselves. It's confusion. It's fear that something else is going to happen. Anger crops up, sadness, loneliness, guilt, emptiness, just exhaustion because people aren't sleeping or eating well, and all of those things that happen. What people really got confused with was, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a pioneer in the bereavement field and just a tremendous mentor to me. I've never met her. She is deceased herself now, but she helped me through a very difficult time in her writing. When my brother-in-law was murdered, I was 23, he was 23, I was pregnant with our second daughter, and he was murdered, and I just couldn't make sense of what was happening in our life and the feelings that my husband and I were having, and his parents were also deceased. So, it was a really difficult time, and we were young, we were only in our 20s. And somebody referred me to her work, and I read her book on death and dying, which is really about having conversations with people who are dying. But it made so much sense to me and just resonated with me about how I felt, and helped me to understand that I really wasn't going crazy, that what I was experiencing was really normal. But what her model was, and as I said, she was a pioneer, and she was a godsend, because at the time in the 70s when she wrote that book and her work came out, there was really nothing for people. There was, the ministers, clergymen, nurses, doctors, social workers, they were desperate. They really were desperate to have a way to talk to people and to get these conversations going. And she gave people that platform to do that. So she opened a lot of doors, started a lot of conversations for people that were very healing and very necessary. And as I said, she's been a pioneer in the bereavement field. But in there, and many of you probably have heard it, is her model that was called, or is called, to often referred to as the 5 stages of grief, or DABDA, D-A-B-D-A, and it stands for denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The challenge with that was that it was interpreted from her model that you went from stage 1, which was denial, to stage 2, which was anger, to stage 3, which was bargaining, and so on. And if you didn't do it in that order and didn't experience all of those, then you were doing it wrong. And that was very confusing for people and very upsetting. She herself said, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, prior to her death, that she did not intend for that to be a list of absolutes, and that it had to go in that linear fashion of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. She developed it as a potential list of responses, and never intended for people to believe that they had to have all 5 of those stages, or that they would go through it in sequential order. And that made much more sense to me too. The other person who's been a tremendous mentor in my life and who I've studied extensively with, I obtained my certificate in death and grief studies with him, is Dr. Alan Holfeld with the Center for Loss in Fort Collins, Colorado. I have many of his books. I just went and saw him speak again on the island, and hope to go back to attend some of his retreats in Arizona that he hosts. But he's phenomenal in his work on companioning people who are bereaved, and his desire to be of service and help people occurred when he was, I believe, 16, when his best friend Phil died from leukemia. And at that time he just realized that he knew he wanted to be working with people who had suffered a loss and were desperate to find a way to heal. So he wrote his first book when he was 19. He's in his 50s now. He's written many, many, many books on companioning and suicide and children in grief, and just a brilliant, brilliant man. And what was so great about his work is that he has this very large, expansive list of potential responses, which is much more easy for people to identify with. That it's some of these ones that are listed: guilt and confusion, fear, sadness, and it goes on and on. And so my work, my framework of loss that I use is really a blend of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work and Alan Wolfowitz' work and my own philosophies and beliefs and what I've learned and developed as a counselor, as well as, my lessons came in life lessons through losing people and having to heal myself and to help my children heal as well. So one of my greatest teachers, though, is Winnie the Pooh. I just love the quotes. They're the most loving quotes, and they really are the most, they are just life lessons. So any chance that you get to be on the internet, you see Winnie the Pooh quotes, really look at them because they are extremely valuable. And I've always loved this one. If you live to be 100, I hope to live to be 100 minus one day, so I never have to live without you. Having said that, you are the experts in your grief, and I am a bereavement educator, grief educator. I'm a grief counselor. I am considered an expert in grief. I'm an author. I've written about it. I speak about it. But I only know what I know, and you know what you know, and you know something different than I do. And you know that your grief will manifest in a way that you feel alone and that you believe that no one gets it. But there are many who do, and having conversations and being around people with like-minded experiences is really helpful, because when you connect with them, they get it. They understand what the confusion, the loss, the yearning, the paralyzing, pain that you go through where you just can't even get out of bed. And you know how that affects you. And so how I work is I really approach people's grief with a teach me attitude, and that's teach me how this has impacted your life. Teach me how it's changed you. Teach me how you're hurt from this, and I will learn from that, and I will share with you what I know. And in doing that, I always learn from my clients and people that I am privileged to work with. I learn from them, I learn from their experience, and they learn from me, and I become a better counselor for it, because everybody's impact is a little bit different. So life is made up of memories and dreams, and when we're grieving, which is in the present, we give up our dreams, which are in the future. And we give that up because we're holding on to our memories of the past. And I really am big on memories, and I really encourage people to use those memories to help them heal, to help them get through the day, to help them get through the darkest hour. They're important. You don't have to give up your memories or shut them down because somebody has died and other people think that you should not dwell in the past. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is to find that balance between living in the past and enjoying those memories and living in the present and, living your life today, although you've had some significant loss. So things like Christmas, holidays, special events, they're all reasons that we celebrate one another, and we come to reminisce and make special memories about those events. But they're just not easy to do when you lose a loved one. It's easy to go back and remember. It's hard to let yourself to make new memories. And I really do understand that it's just a real challenge to do. But it's so important that you allow yourself the privilege of living, because you have a life as well. And but again, those are special things that we go through, and we teach children. We make it a priority from the time of birth that we're going to celebrate birthdays and the accomplishments and achievements of our children. And, we acknowledge death with a funeral or memorial service, and then we're expected to let it go. And it just does not work that way. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that you and I know, and that we share with the rest of the world. Now that you have lost someone, everything is different now, and there's really three realities that you're going to go through. So the first reality is that Everything is different. Life is different for you now. Nothing feels safe. You may feel like you don't have a sense of purpose or direction. You may feel that it's just gone and that there's a feeling, you may have this feeling of like, what's the point? What's the point of getting out of bed? What's the point of trying to do anything if this is what happens in life? People are often just numb to feeling any sense of joy, fun, or happiness, and they almost feel sinful when they engage in fun activities. It's really, really tough. If you think about it, have an image of holding a nickel or a coin in your hand, and if you hold it just as tight as you can, and when you're holding it, and you turn your fist so that your palm is facing down, you open your hand, that coin is going to drop. But if you turn your hand so that your palm is facing up and you open your hand, the coin is just sitting there and it carries with you. Well, that's kind of like memories. You know, you don't have to drop them. You don't have to give them up to live your life. You can carry them with you and use them to enjoy life, to, you know, pass on to other people stories about, you know, people that they knew or that they are connected to, you know, or related to and never got to meet. It's all important, but life is different now, and you will feel, as I have felt, that often I walk with one foot in one life and a foot in another life, and trying to find the balance of where I want to be. The second reality is that life will continue to unfold. It's going to continue to unfold for you, for your family, and for your friends. And as you look forward into the future before your loved one died, you know, you had lots of plans together, like, or, you know, just plans if this was a parent or a friend, and, you know, or a husband or a wife, like you made plans together, or you had plans on your own, and they were meaningful, and it's what you wanted to do, and maybe you knew what you were going to do in school, or plans for when you retired, or what your career was going to be like. And then when someone dies, like, you're just acutely aware that that loved one is not going to be present for any of it. And then it's inevitable that you think of this as the end for you too, that life can't go on or shouldn't go on. It can be helpful a bit to, you know, in the sense of, if you're thinking about the future without your loved one, it can be helpful in the sense of preparing you for what the days will be like without them. But most people don't go there. It's really, you know, you're feeling like, I just can't do this, and there's no point to do that too. But, you know, if you stay in that mindset that there is no point, that you shouldn't feel happy, you shouldn't engage in joyful times, then what you're really doing is trapping yourself in this black hole. And, you know, at some point you decide, you choose to survive this, and you choose whether you're going to stay there, because if you stay in that black hole, that's where you stay. But you can plan to move forward, right? And so that's probably the third reality, and the most challenging obstacle is, how do I move forward? Because your dreams may feel empty, and the future feels pointless, and life is joyless, and your dreams have to change because they no longer include that person, or can be surrounded around events that you were going to do together, or just planning that you could do your life because that person was going to be fine, right? So dreams just feel non-existent, and we just feel like, what's the point of having them? You know, goals and dreams and wants and desires, because it can just be taken away. So we tend to give up on our dreams to hold on to the memories of the past. And as I said, it's almost as if we feel like if we hold on tight enough that life can't change. You know, it's a safety thing, like, you know, I'm going to hang on to these dreams, and I'm not moving, I'm not doing anything else, I'm not going to face another loss. So that is kind of a resistance, you know, when people say, when they talk about denial, and I've written about this, it's like, I don't know about people really, I mean, yes, there are some people who deny that there's been a death and that life has changed so much, but really, you know, I see it more as a resistance. In one of the phases through grief that I talk about is called morphine, and it's where you see your life morphing into something different. You see your life morphing into a future that doesn't include that person, and you don't like it. You didn't ask for it, you didn't sign up for it, you don't want it, so you're resisting going there because that person's not there. And you know what? It is completely normal because this happened without choice or negotiation. Nobody got married to get divorced. Nobody got married to become a widow or a widower. You know, I mean, but those things do happen. And so to resist the outcome is pretty normal too, because you didn't ask for it. That's not what you signed up for. So, but as I said, life goes on, things happen, and you've got to find a way to go on. So now I want to share a story with you about a young woman in Alberta. She is a lovely young lady who's in university now. And when I came in contact with her and her family, it was because her brother had been murdered. And my first husband's cousin actually worked with this young woman's dad and got us in touch with one another. And I supported them by phone and connected to them with some resources closer to home for themselves. But this young woman was in her grade 12 year when her brother was murdered, and he was in his third year of university, and it was in January 12th, which is actually, I won't forget it because it's my grandson's birthday, but her brother was killed by people who he didn't know, who had crashed a house party, got thrown out of the house party, and then they came back with more people that nobody knew, and a young woman and a young man stabbed him, and he bled to death. So this young woman, because it was her graduation year, January he was killed, she was graduating in June, she struggled and struggled. They were very, very close, a very close family, and she just didn't think she could go through her graduation without having her brother there. Very smart young lady too, like her, you know, her grades were right up there, and she managed to keep them up, but she just had no desire to graduate, no desire to call any attention to herself, to allow herself to have any fun, or to, you know, just be part of it. Just, you know, she just didn't want any part of it. So I worked with her a few times on the phone, and you know, we talked about the celebration, and it took a lot for her to see that she deserved to be happy, and that if she could turn this around and it were her that was gone and it was her brother, what would she say to him? And she knew that she would tell him that he deserved to have that graduation, and he deserved to be there and to be with his friends. And you know, so it took some coaching to get her to be able to say that to herself, to understand that she wasn't being unloyal to him in any way by enjoying what she had worked for 12 years to get to have this graduation. So we talked about, you know, particularly their situation, that there was a delay in grief because there also had, you know, was a tie-up legally with pending trials and all, and they would just kind of move ahead a little bit in their grief, and then something would come up and it was like ripping it wide open again. It's really, really tough time for the family. So in working with her, you know, we talked about having a plan, like what could you do to bring your brother into the ceremony so that it could be a special time for you. And she had already made some plans to have his picture. If she was going to attend, his picture would be in the slideshow, and she was going to have an empty chair. And, you know, as we went on, we talked about other things. And so she came up with the idea of a balloon releasing, you know, we talked about balloon releases, and so she thought maybe that's what she'd like to do. And so this is an actual photo of the orange and blue balloons that she had. And after she had her hair and makeup done and her dress on and she was ready to go to graduation, she had all their family and friends together in their yard. Everybody was given the balloon, and they wrote messages to her brother on their balloon, and they all stood together and released the balloons before she got into the limo. Still was tough for her, still brought up lots of emotion, but what it allowed her to do was to release the pain so that she could interrupt the sorrow, so she could go ahead and enjoy what she deserved to enjoy. Other examples of that were both my daughters when they were married, very aware that their dads were not going to be there to walk them down the aisle. Every girl wants that. Certainly it was something he had planned on, wearing his red serge and walking them down the aisle, something I had, you know, dreamed of seeing too, and that wasn't going to happen. And as I said, I remarried. They have a wonderful stepfather. He is walking them down the aisle. He deserves to do that, but I also really wanted to acknowledge that they had a father who was not there, and that was something that was painful for them. So both of them as well, we worked to come up with something to honor their dad in their wedding ceremony. And for my eldest daughter, Mariah, she had my brother in his dress uniform as sheriff and a police officer who my husband trained. She wore her red serge, and they walked behind her and my husband down the aisle and carried my husband's Stetson. And when they got to the altar, my husband presented her to her fiance. They placed my husband's Stetson on a little pedestal and gave her a nice salute. And we didn't have to explain that to people. Everybody knew her dad wasn't there. Everybody knew why her dad wasn't there. But it just gave her permission to say, he's with me. I can go on and enjoy the day. My younger daughter, Dale, when she married, she had 2 of his police officers attend in uniform, and she had a display of his boots, his high brown Stetson boots and his hat there. So again, just little subtle things, but spoke volumes for all of us and what we had been through. So giving yourselves permission to find a way to acknowledge that person is extremely important. Christmas isn't for everyone. It is, as I said, it's just the most difficult time of year for people, and our inclination is to just, sock ourselves away and just run away. We don't want to be anywhere where there's, all the fuss and muss. It's just not for everyone, and it may not be painful for everyone. The first Christmas for me was very painful, and because Christmas is a very big deal in my life, very big deal in my family, and it's still, I think on some level, it does bother me, and I think about my mom and my dad and my husband, my brother, my friend. I think about them all as I'm preparing for Christmas and that they're not there. And certainly as the years go by, it's not as painful for me, and overall it may not be painful for other people, but they can still have a feeling of feeling empty, or that something is missing in their lives. And again, because Christmas for us was so filled with tradition and memories that it just seemed unbearable to get through, and we had to find a way to do it. So as I said, the more that we move towards Christmas or celebrations, for people who have a broken heart and are really having a difficult time, our natural inclination is to move away from the pain. So that's the resistance that comes in as life morphs in front of you into this new reality. Our inclination is just to move away from the pain, the sorrow, and the celebration, because it triggers the pain and the sorrow. And really what we need to do is embrace it. And I know that sounds very strange, but if you think about it as what this says, we don't remember the days in our lives, we remember moments, and all of us are entitled to remember those special moments, right? So we remember dates like birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, and absolutely, you will never forget the day that your loved one died. You will never forget. We remember the moments of love with them, and we remember the moment we lost a piece of us too when they died. You'll never forget that, no matter what happens, good, bad, or indifferent. You'll never forget. It's like, people could talk about Elvis Presley. They know exactly where they were when he died. Some people know exactly what they're doing when John Lennon was killed, when Martin Luther King was killed, John F. Kennedy. You can tell you exactly all those places where I was and what I was doing. And that's the same. The day my brother died, the day my husband died, the moment they died, those images, what took place is like a movie that I can just automatically play in my head. So you will never forget. So by embracing the holidays and moving forward, you're not going to forget. You're not going to forget. It will always be there. But our inclination is to move away from the pain, to move away from the celebration, and what we really need to do is move towards it. Because by pushing away from the holidays, I guarantee this, it will only intensify your pain. And I know that sounds a little bit backward, but the more you isolate yourself, the more that you go deeper into that black hole of sorrow and pain, the more painful it's going to be. And I'm not talking about just ignoring it, just dismissing it. It's really about acknowledging it and giving a name to it, and honoring it in some way, as I mentioned this young woman did with her graduation, and that I did with my daughter's weddings, and I've done it with, babies and everything. So moving towards the pain is really about being proactive in your grief. It's a way to address your feelings, and in doing so, you actually do heal your heart, but it doesn't eliminate your loss, right? So what I'm encouraging people to do is to interrupt the sadness, interrupt the anger, interrupt the disappointment. It will all be there waiting for you. It's not going anywhere, right? You can go back to it. But if you can interrupt it and allow yourself to have a little bit of joy, that begins the healing. So one of the biggest lessons for me was giving myself permission to live. So I said that, my heart had to break again on December 24th so I could embrace December 25th. So this was our first Christmas. And the lesson I learned was I was invested so much into the symbolism and story of our life that it kind of backfired a little bit because of what I did. But I didn't want to have Christmas that first year, and yet my children were, as I said, were 10 and 12. They were normal kids, and so they felt sad, they felt happy, they cried, they didn't cry, they were with friends, they didn't want to be with friends, but they were still excited about Christmas happening. And, lots of cousins, and, that joy was just building for them, even though it had been 2 months since their dad had died, only 2 months. So as we approached Christmas, I realized that, I needed to have it for them. And partly what changed my mind was a song that I heard when we were moving. Our house was being packed up, and I went back to let the movers in to load. They had been there the day before packing, and the girls and I left the house the night my husband died, because he died in our home, and we were staying with my brother. So when I went back, I didn't realize that the movers had left the radio on, and I went in, and I was alone, and, I was 34 years old, and it was just I was so aware that I had been with him since I was 17 years old, so it wasn't only packing up my life as an adult with him. It was half my life had been spent with this person already, and I was packing this whole thing up and moving on. And I was profoundly sad. It was December the 7th. I didn't want to have Christmas. And as I said, I was waiting for the movers, and I realized that they had left the radio playing, and I sat down, and there was a Christmas carol playing. Don't know the name of the song, never heard it again. I don't know who recorded it, don't know who wrote it. But the only lines that I tuned into were, "Daddy's gone, but Christmas must go on, because the little ones need the memories." And it was a huge wake-up call for me to realize that I could be sad, and they could be sad, but we had the right to interrupt that pain, to experience life the way that he did until he died, and that it was okay to do that. So in preparation of that, I decided to be proactive and acknowledge that he would not be here, and acknowledge it on Christmas Eve so that we could enjoy Christmas Day. So we were in a new home, and I had decided that I would do Christmas, as I'd always had my family come over because I needed to be busy. But on Christmas Eve, I took my girls to the cemetery, as we had done many times. We went Christmas Eve. It was just at dusk. It was beautiful. It had just snowed. The sky was just kind of that dark blue, and it was just this perfect hush through the whole cemetery, and, lots of signs that people had been there, little Christmas trees that had lights on them and flowers. And so we put down flowers, and I actually had my wedding rings and their dad's wedding ring in my pocket. And so I spent some time talking to the girls and talking to them about our union as a family and what made it special, and then I presented them with the rings. And my eldest daughter got my rings, and Dale got her dad's ring. And of course it was very emotional, but it was also healing for us at the same time. And the lesson that I learned about being, kind of invested in the symbolism of that was that 2 years later, Dale lost her dad's ring when she was out skating with a girlfriend at the local rink, and she pulled her glove off, and the ring went flying, and never found it. My husband, I'm married to, actually went for a whole week and brought home the snow from the rink every day and shoveled through it in our driveway to see if he could find it, and he never did. So, you know, the lesson in that for me was to be careful about the attachment that I put into linking objects, that they really are good to pass on the memories, and they can be very healing. But also, you know, make sure that you don't put too much into it as well, because it can really backfire. She was really upset that she lost it. So it's just hard to see the beauty in the world, particularly when your world feels cold and lonely. And as I said a few slides back, the journey is fraught with confusion and chaos, and you feel like you're living in a fog. And that is all part of the grief journey. But as that veil slowly begins to lift and you're able to see again, you will see life and you will see things, but you will never forget your loved one, and you will never minimize who they were in your life for you, and you don't need to. Anybody that wants you to do that, it's about them. It's about their inability to be present to your pain. It's not about you. You have the right to hold them in your heart. They are forever etched in your heart, and nobody can take that away from you. What tends to happen, though, is that we can have what I call as rage. It will hold us in a place of pain and suffering. And rage is just a acronym that I use for regret, anger, guilt, and emotional roller coaster. Because you have been, or perhaps still are, on the roller coaster ride from hell. And it is extremely difficult, but it is a cycle that can be, you know, self-perpetuating as well. You feel guilty about them being gone. You feel guilty that this happened. You feel guilty that you're the one left here to live. Can lead you to feeling regret that you didn't finish some business, you didn't get to do things together. Can lead you to feeling angry that this happened in the first place, and where was God? You know, when took this good person, to lead you to that emotional roller coaster, back to feeling guilty. It is a cycle. And so finding a way to interrupt it is extremely important. And it really is healthy. And that's kind of my biggest education with people right now, is that it's okay to interrupt the thoughts and the feelings. You're not going to get rid of them. You know, you have to work through that process to reconcile your loss before it actually dissipates from life. So interrupting it is only taking a break from it, and taking a break from it allows you to go the distance and work through it all. So you need to do this in bite-sized pieces. So this picture is my little grandson, who's now 8. He was about 4 in this picture, and the point is that somebody here still needs me. Somebody still needs you. And my grandsons, who are now 3 in total, all remind me of my first husband. Sam, who is 8, has his healthy head of hair, and when he's sleeping, he sleeps exactly the way my husband does, on his side with his arms stretched out and his head rested on it. When you walk past the bed, you almost think it's Jerry there. The middle grandson has his impish little behaviors and is quite the prankster and the joker, and if he can get you on something, he will. That was so Jerry. And the baby has Jerry's brilliant blue eyes, just amazing. So I get to see him in all 3 of them. And my daughter's the same thing. One looks like him, one acts like him. So for every breath and step they take, he's with me. But overall, it was, you know, as they were born, you know, I was really reminded, as I was with my girls that first Christmas, that they needed the memories, that I had to realize that I needed to be present to my children, to the good things that were going to happen in their life, that I was given that responsibility now to be there for both of us, and they deserve to have somebody present and happy for them and to celebrate the joys. And my grandchildren do too. They never got to meet their biological grandfather, and someday I do believe they will in heaven, and they are very happy with the papa that they have, and he's very good to them, and they have a wonderful relationship. But they didn't get to know their grandfather, and it's up to me to give them that legacy, but it is also up to me to be present to them so that they can live their life and allow life to unfold in a joyful way. And I have every right to be a miserable, unhappy woman, and I could do that, and I'm not going to have a very good relationship if I do that. So today, that's how I get through every event. I focus on life as in people who need me to be present. And, you know, life is lived one day at a time, one moment at a time. And at this present moment, that's all you have. And so in these times where it seems so hard to allow yourself to be joyful, you just work on bringing yourself into the moment so that you can live. Right? So life is just full of surprises, both good and bad, heartwarming and heartbreaking. But as I said, if we stay in a place of sorrow, we live in the heartbreak, and nobody deserves to do that. And I told you how I made it through the first Christmas, and I've applied this technique to every other event that I've had to get through, is that somebody needs me to be present, and I deserve to be present to them, and they deserve to have me as a happy, whole person as well. And the biggest lesson was that I had to forgive myself for being the one left here to live. I had to forgive myself that I was 34 years old, widowed, with 2 children, and then to see their life unfold as beautiful as it is, and all the wonderful things they've done, and the beautiful children they have, that I'm the one that gets to take that in the present world. But that lesson, I learned that in the healing, it really was the ending is not ours to write. We don't get to choose who will die, how they will die, how old they'll be when they die, or where we are at in the journey of life with them then when they die. We only get to choose to survive, and that becomes a daunting choice, to say the least. But it still is a choice that each one of us has to make. So there are ways to interrupt the sadness, the anger, the sorrow, the disappointment, and I promise you, you know, it will be there waiting for you when you come back to it, and you can work on it some more. But in the meantime, there are ways that you can remember your loved ones during the holidays. Number 1, talk about them. Talk about them. Say their name. Do something that you did together. Write a letter to him or her. Create a memory album. Fill it with cards, pictures, letters, whatever you have. Leave it on the table. Let people go through it. It's a conversation starter for sure. Give a gift to charity in their name. Cook that person's favorite foods. On my mom's birthday, my sisters and I were all spread out all over the country, but we cook all her favorite foods and enjoy them just to think about her. I hang my mom's picture in my Christmas tree, and as well as a little elephant. I have bells for my husband and my brother. They're just, you know, people come in. They're not necessarily going to know what that means, but it's meaningful for me. Watch a favorite family movie that you enjoyed together. Go someplace where you enjoyed being together. Try something new and spontaneous, develop new traditions, and hand over traditions ceremoniously. Like my husband always carved the turkey. When it was time, handed over that tradition to somebody else. You know, make a little toast, have a cheer. You know, it's okay to acknowledge it. The other thing is you can allow for sadness. You know, your feelings are real. That's for sure. Pamper yourself, get lots of rest, sleep, and allow for some quiet time. And the big thing is to know your limitations. You don't have to do the big crowd. And if the big crowd doesn't understand that you can't do the big crowd, just leave that with them. That's their problem. That's not yours. Yours is, I can't do the big crowd. I can do a little bit of it. So you need to give yourself permission to pace your way through the holidays. Engage with children whenever possible, and I know that this is particularly challenging for people who have lost a child, that, you know, all these other little children around, but you know what, enjoy them and find, you know, a way to enjoy a child and the smiles and the joy, and I know that can be heart-tugging and heart-wrenching, but be present for them so you can remember your little one too. And let yourself laugh. Let yourself laugh. It's not a sin to laugh after somebody has died, and actually a little bit of humor goes a long way in breaking up the heartache and will help you to get through the events even more. But in the meantime, there are things that you need to convey to your family and your friends. You want to be sure and say to them and let them know that Christmas, Special events, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, marriages, weddings, all of those things stir up unreconciled grief, and they can be a trigger and bring about deep feelings for the person that you're missing. Perfectly normal. As I said, your feelings are real, and you have no control over when they're going to surface. So you may burst into tears when the turkey's put on the table and somebody else goes to carve it. That's okay. Don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. It just can't. It's unpredictable, and it has no time frame. Speaking about your loved one is what you need to do, and hearing their name is just as important. So don't be afraid to say their name, and encourage them to say the person's name and share some stories. For you, the challenge will be to find a balance for people so that you aren't always pulling them into the past to talk about that person, but allowing them and allowing yourself to talk about them, and then again going back to being present to people who are there. What you may need for them really is to have their willingness to be present to your tears and to just listen to your heartbreak. Their willingness to attend a special service or to help you create your own ceremony to honor your loved one who's no longer here, and their willingness to let you be who you are today, knowing that you will be different again tomorrow, and 6 months from now, and 1 year from now, you will be different. Silent Night or any other Christmas carol may always make you cry, and I'm not going to lie to you and say that after the first year you will be just fine. Your heart will always yearn for the person that you have lost. Their stocking will always hang empty and forevermore will never be filled again. You may always feel somewhat apprehensive about celebrations and holidays, and that's normal. But my job as a grief counselor and a coach and an educator and a hope generator is to give you the hope, and the one promise that I can make is that if you do the work of healing and mourning, then you can live again with passion and joy and still feel connected to your loved one, and you won't be doing anything wrong. So, that's kind of the end of my presentation. I do have, to do an official little commercial break about things that I do and how people can work with me if they so desire. First and foremost, you can always go to my website, JanelleBeebe.com. There's a free ebook on there. I post a newsletter and a blog is posted weekly. If you sign up for the ebook, you'll get my newsletter every week, and a blog is posted every week. I have a Facebook page that you can just search for, Janelle Breeze Biagioni, and I post on there 3-4 times a day, little articles, tidbits, pictures, things like that to help people. So all of that's available to anybody at any time. But if people would like to work further with me, I do individual counseling, and I can do that with people by phone, on Skype, or in person. I have what I call the Grief Buster session, which is a kind of a one-off strategizing session, solution-focused, and it's for 90 minutes. And it's really about just, getting together once to talk about maybe, like, say, for example, somebody could call me and say, can I just do a Grief Buster session and talk about Christmas and how I'm going to get through that, or I'm getting married and I'm not sure how I can, do that. So that's available to people too, and again, I can do that in person, on the phone, or by Skype. I do have an intensive coaching program that's 18 weeks long, and this is really for people who are further down the road in the grief journey and are ready to rebuild their life from ground zero up and just not sure how they're going to do that. I can work with people to do that. The other thing that's really exciting for me, there's a couple of them, but one, I am hosting my second retreat, Healing Hearts 2015, will be taking place on May 14th to 17th. There's information about that on my website, but it's a beautiful retreat located in Victoria, and we have 4 days of sharing, honoring loved ones, working through the process of grieving, sharing our stories, getting to connect with other people who have had similar experiences, and learning how to redesign your life after loss. Pretty powerful weekend. I was very, very, very happy with the first one, and I know that this one will be just as magical and transformative for people. I do have a new book out called Life Losses: Healing for a Broken Heart, and it validates and dissolves the profound heartbreak associated with death, suicide, murder, transitional losses, and caregiving for a loved one with chronic or catastrophic injury. It's a book that I'm very, very proud of. It's practical, inspirational. It honors you, honors me, and it walks with those who are in grief. And, you know, I really do believe it's a book of hope. So you can, that is available to people on Amazon.com, or you can order it right through my website. Yeah, so again, my Christmas wish to all of you is that if you find peace and comfort in the memories of your loved one and the courage to allow yourself some joy in your heart, that's my wish, and my promise is that you won't forget them by living. In fact, you will honor them, and they will want you to fulfill your life. So allow yourself to live, to really, really live, not to just exist, as you deserve that, to live your life fully, wholly, and with all the joyful experiences. And you don't have to trade one for the other. Having that happiness doesn't mean you have to give up on the memories or forget your loved one. You don't need to. You can have them both in your life, and you deserve to have them both in your life. So my final slide here is that at any time, people can call me, they can email me, send me a message. I will get back to you. It may take me a little bit of time, but I will get back to you. It has my Facebook page on there. I'm on Twitter at Janelle Beebe. You can keep in touch with me. My cell phone is on there. You can always email Mariah about some information that you may want on programs, anything like that. And there will be a recording sent out to all of you so you can listen to this again. And I have no attachment to it. If you want to send this recording on to somebody else that you know, I'm more than happy to have you share my work. So thank you so much for joining me today. God bless each and every one of you, and I truly, truly wish for you to find some peace and joy this holiday season. Take care.